As you may already know, ElderWorks is a not-for-profit organization supporting any older adult or senior who has aging questions, needs referrals for assisted living, memory care, home care agencies, or other senior housing options. Our complimentary services are always available to you. Just give us a call at 855-462-0100 or visit our website, elderworks.org, elderwerks.org, where you'll find hundreds and hundreds of articles and supportive material to help you through the aging process. Again, thank you for taking aging seriously and planning for your future needs. Enjoy ElderWorks Expo.
Just so you know, I am the president and founder of ElderWorks. I am here to introduce our lovely doctor, who's so happy. Very good. You will love her. From what I hear, it's an open forum, so she's going to entertain you, and you're going to entertain her. How exciting, right? This is interactive. You're all supposed to go, whoop, whoop. No, just me? Okay. So this is Dr. Margaret Danilovich, which is a really hard name to say. She is the senior director of Leonard Schanfield Research Institute with CJ SeniorLife, who's a very large partner of ElderWorks. So if you don't know CJ SeniorLife, ElderWorks and CJ collaborated and built Dementia Reality for dementia education, so that we can help educate the entire nation on how to work with someone with dementia. Isn't that exciting? Anyway, I'm going to let you take your way. Thank you so much for being here. Bye, y'all. Have fun.
Thanks for being here. A little bit about me and just kind of how we'll run today. I'm a physical therapist by background. I've spent 15 years working with older adults. So whether it's PT in nursing homes, independent living, assisted living, my whole career has been spent with people 60 years of age and better. I have a PhD in public health with a focus in gerontology from UIC here in Chicago. And all of my research really focuses on what do we actually need to do to age well? And specifically, how should we be active? How should we be exercising to maintain our independence, to prevent falls, and to live the way we want to in our later chapters of life? So today the focus of our presentation is going to be sort of on what does the research say about what we should be doing. I am totally fine if you want to throw your hands up for questions during our time together. We can make this interactive. I'm also going to leave time so we can have questions at the end. So let's get started and jump in. I love this topic, so I know we only have an hour together, so if you need me to slow down or you want me to explain anything, again, just raise your hand. So when we talk about healthy aging, what I want us to actually think about is maybe the opposite of healthy aging, because as we're thinking about healthy aging, what I want as an older adult might be different than what you want or what you want or you want. We all have different definitions. So let's for a moment think about the idea of maybe unhealthy aging. And the way that we can think about unhealthy aging is by thinking about frailty. So very often we might hear or see an older person described as frail. So has anyone ever heard this or seen this? Okay, I'm seeing lots of nods. I see it all the time in the medical setting, right? A doctor will say, oh, this person looks really frail. They're not going to be able to survive this surgery. So we use frail really as an adjective for describing people's health. And the first thing I want you to take away from today's talk is frailty is not an adjective. Actually, it is a geriatric syndrome that is kind of the opposite of healthy aging. So the way that we diagnose frailty is by looking at 5 different criteria. For someone to be considered frail, they need to have 3, 4, or 5 of these criteria. Someone who is pre-frail has 1 or 2. And if you're non-frail, or what we might consider aging with good health, you have 0. So our 5 criteria are weakness, muscle weakness. You're not having the strength to do things. Exhaustion or fatigue. This is often defined as the person who, walks a couple blocks and says, "Oh, I'm so exhausted." Or I see patients who say, "I went to the grocery store in the morning and I have to rest the whole rest of the day because I'm too tired." That's someone who has fatigue or exhaustion. Low amounts of physical activity. So physical activity is defined as anything our bodies are doing beyond sitting. I'm actually being physically active right now because I'm standing and walking around. So it's not exercise, it's movement that's not sitting or laying in bed. The 4th criteria is unintentional weight loss. And the way this is defined is not trying to lose weight and you lose more than 10% of your body weight in 6 months. And maybe you've seen this, that person who just looks like they're getting smaller and littler, and we might say they're frail. It's that adjective. It's the unintentional weight loss. And then the 5th criteria is slow walking speed. And really here we're looking for speeds below 0.8 meters per second. Why that number? Does anyone have a guess why that number matters? It's how fast we need to walk to cross the street. It's how fast you need to sort of walk in the community. And what the research would say is our walking speed is actually the 6th vital sign, because there is such a strong correlation with someone's walking speed and their risk for falls, their risk for hospitalization, and unfortunately, their risk for death. So we want to really promote all of these factors to help people be less frail and age with good health. So the question kind of comes up, well, as we're thinking about aging, one of the common things I see often is people think that aging is just something that magically happens when we turn 65. And that's wrong, right? We're all aging. We're all going to be older at the end of this talk than we were at the beginning. We're all aging. It's a process that starts at birth. What we know physiologically is a lot of those sort of age-related changes. I'm getting weaker, I'm getting tired, I don't have as much energy, my posture's changing. Those all start at about age 30. Oh, I know. So age 30 is when we have our max physiologic strength, is when we have our max physiologic bone strength. It's typically when we have our maximum sort of energy and oxygenation. So it's kind of our aging process sort of happens after age 30. But what we think about in terms of frailty and how frailty sort of occurs is that this idea of frailty being the opposite of healthy aging is a systemic change in your body. So there's all of these changes that are occurring in all of our body systems. Our nervous system, our digestive system, our musculoskeletal system, everything is changing, and all of those changes actually contribute to more frailty. And so on the far left of this figure, we see there are these factors that lead to more frailty. Advanced age, there's genetics, lifestyle, people that have other health conditions, and there's also environmental factors that can occur. We also know that people, as we age, we normally have higher levels of inflammation in our bodies. That's just a normal age-related change. But when we have certain health conditions, we can also have higher levels of inflammatory markers. And the state of chronic inflammation is not good for our health. And so as we have more inflammation in our system. It can actually lead to a lot of changes in our endocrine, the hormonal system we have in our body. It leads to changes in our musculoskeletal system, all of those types of things. Our cardiovascular system even. If our blood vessels are more inflamed, it's going to affect our blood pressure and the blood flow to our brain, all of these factors. So these are sort of the mechanisms that then contribute to these 5 criteria in what we call our frailty phenotype. The 5 symptoms, so to speak, that make up frailty or unhealthy aging. And the consequences of being more frail, having less health, are things like falling, having greater levels of disability or needing more care, and even death. So I know, you know this too, and Time Magazine knows that exercise is good for us. This is not earth-shattering, right? And so we're not going to talk today about the research on, oh, exercise is good. We're going to really talk about what you need to be doing, and also sort of why we all know exercise is good and we kind of don't do it consistently. So we all know exercise is good, and there's growing awareness of this idea that exercise is actually medicine, because across all of the research out there, pretty much for every single condition, there are very, very few conditions where exercise does not make that disease state better. So we have this recognition now that exercise is medicine. Now, if you go and your physician prescribes a new medication, you get information on the dosage, the frequency that you should be taking it. There's a lot of specific prescriptions. We don't have that necessarily about exercise, and so that's what we really want to dive into today. What is the best dose that you should be taking to age well? So in 2018, the revised U.S. physical activity guidelines were released, and what these guidelines said were that for all Americans over the age of 18, we should be striving for 150 minutes of aerobic exercise each week. So aerobic exercise are things that get your heart rate up, get your breathing rate pumping, swimming, biking, walking, all of those kinds of things. 150 minutes is the goal. We also need to be doing exercises that build our strength. So whether that's doing things without weights like push-ups or a squat, using our exercise bands, using machines, things where you have to actually push or pull against some sort of force. That's resistance exercise. And we need to be doing those types of strengthening exercises 2 days per week. And then third, we should add balance exercises if we are at risk for falls. The numbers are pretty staggering. About 1 in 3 people over the age of 65 fall every year. So I would operate under the assumption that we are all at risk for falls and add those balance exercises in. So these become sort of our guidelines of what we should be doing. So as I mentioned, our aerobic exercise are things like biking or swimming, going for a walk. Even cleaning your house can be aerobic exercise. Right? I got a lot of dust. It takes a lot of scrubbing. You know, if you're mopping floors, that's pretty intensive. It gets your heart rate up. So any of those types of activities that are raising your heart rate, raising your respiratory rate, are aerobic exercise. So how best to do this is, the ideal is that you are trying to really increase your heart rate. And this is predicated on a very strong body of evidence that says there is a dose-response relationship. Meaning the more dose we take of this exercise medicine, the better our health outcomes. So I'm going to give you an example of how we would implement this. It's better for my health to go for a leisurely walk than sit on the couch. But as I'm leisurely walking around, I'm not raising my heart rate. So my health benefits are better than laying on the couch, but I'm not taking the right dose. It's like if you had high blood pressure and you took a quarter of a pill. It's probably going to change your blood pressure a little bit, but not as effectively as taking your full dose. So what we want to do is actually raise our heart rate to that therapeutic level. And to do that, we need to actually turn up the intensity. And so the best dosage of aerobic exercise is about 70 to 85% of your maximum heart rate. That's pretty high. You should feel as if you are working hard to very hard when you are engaging in aerobic exercise. So one way to monitor this is through something called a talk test. So I'll give you a real life example. I was out this morning with my young daughter and she was in the stroller and I'm pushing her along. We're not going very fast. My husband and I could have a very easy conversation. That's not the right dosage to build those health outcomes. Now yesterday, I decided to go for a jog. I'm running, down the sidewalk. Could I have talked to someone? With a lot of difficulty. That's the intensity we want. And so for our talk test, we want that level where we could say, I could have a conversation with someone, but it would be difficult because my heart rate is up, my breathing rate is up, I'm saying a few words and taking a break because I need to catch my breath. That's like the pacing we sort of want for that optimal dose. And the reason this is really important for healthy aging is because what is good for your heart is also good for your brain. And so as we are increasing that intensity, we're getting our heart beating more frequently, we're actually increasing blood flow to our brain. And that is a very powerful mechanism to prevent or delay any cognitive changes. And so the research on exercise and cognition is really a hot area right now because there's no treatment for dementia. The medication trials have just proven totally ineffective. And so exercise really is the best intervention we have for dementia and cognitive impairments right now. So among people who have cognitive impairment, these are people who've been diagnosed with Alzheimer's or with other dementias, exercise programs actually show that they will improve global cognition scores. So this is really key because even if someone has been diagnosed, they still should be engaging in exercise because we can improve their cognition. And the research would say we want sessions around 30 minutes. We need them to be at that sort of moderate to higher intensity level, and we need to be doing it about twice a week. And that tends to have the most effectiveness for people that are diagnosed with dementia in improving their cognition. Now, the important piece is that regular exercise in our midlife actually reduces the risk for Alzheimer's disease and other dementias by up to 45%. So let's think about that, let it sink in for a moment. If we exercise in midlife consistently, we're cutting our risk for dementia in half. It's this.
We're past that.
We're past that, yes. Okay. And so, this is the idea of it's never too late. So even if you're past that and you're in a later midlife stage, let's say, it's never too late because what we're showing through MRI research is that exercise actually changes your brain. So as we're getting more blood flow coming to the brain, it's actually causing a hypertrophy of brain tissue. And importantly, it's actually happening in the hippocampus, which is the area that's key for memory formation. So regardless of age, regardless of cognitive status, we all need to be exercising because it's the single best thing we can do for our brains. What's good for our heart, good for our brain. But the fact of the matter is people don't exercise enough. About 30% of people over the age of 65 don't exercise at all. Completely sedentary. About only 20% of people actually meet those guidelines of 150 minutes, 2 days a week of strength training. So what this is saying is, you know, of the people that do exercise, 80% are not taking the right medicine. That's a huge number, and it's a huge problem in our care for older adults. And only 10% of older adults are consistently participating in strength training, those exercises that build our muscle strength. So this is this dilemma, right? You know, I know, Time Magazine knows exercise is good, but we're not doing it. We're not taking our medicine. And part of the problem, we can blame other people. So we know that gyms sometimes are not as welcoming for older people. They might be more inaccessible. Certainly here in Chicago in the winter, we have weather and transportation barriers. We also know that there's a lot of like digital options out there. We can go on YouTube and you can, you know, type in senior fitness. But it's not really engaging. You still have to take that step. There's nothing to hold you accountable. We also know that as we get older, we often are managing multiple health conditions. And so if you have a bad shoulder or a bad knee and you're going on YouTube, how do you tailor those exercises for what you need? And so we need more individualized solutions. And so there's really nothing out there that is serving older adults right now, and that is a big problem. There's also some misconceptions that people tend to have about strength training and resistance exercising in general, or more specifically. And one of the things is people often think, I gotta lift really heavy weights in order to get stronger. People also think, oh, this is gonna make me bulky. I'm gonna that's not the figure I want. And this third thing, it's gonna be too painful. I'm gonna lift weights, it's gonna hurt my joints, I have arthritis, this is not what I should do. And a lot of this is unfortunately built on some maybe false news, you know, or fake news here about what strength training is really like. And so for many, maybe decades, you know, people thought you shouldn't exercise if you have arthritis, you shouldn't be loading your joints if you have arthritis, that's terrible. And now the research is actually saying, if you have arthritis, it's probably the best thing you can do. You need to get your muscles stronger to support that joint. And so we're having to combat a lot of misinformation that people have sort of heard from their doctors, from media sources over the years. So these are some of the misconceptions that often come up. But the sad part is, we know what happens with aging is a normal loss of muscle strength and muscle mass. And so after the age of 30, on average, a normal change is 1% loss of muscle strength per year after the age of 30. So I can see everyone calculating, okay, my age to 30. I mean, so the facts really are staggering. From 30 to 80, you're going to normally lose 50% of your strength. That is what happens with aging as a normal phenomenon. And I stress that because it gets complicated when people have chronic health conditions, when they don't exercise and lead a sedentary lifestyle. Those rates actually accelerate. And so we see this profound loss of muscle strength that normally occurs and that is exacerbated by our behaviors and lifestyles. And so we know some of the benefits of strength training are, one, it's going to make your muscles stronger. And we need muscle strength to do things like get out of a chair, even walk, do all of our activities of daily living. It's going to improve our physical function. It's also going to improve memory and cognitive function. We're getting our muscles moving, we're doing it, we're at a higher intensity, increased blood flow. What's good for our heart? Good for our brain. It's going to have these sort of spillover effects of better sleep duration, better quality sleep, and perhaps most importantly, it can improve your lifespan. And so recent research that actually was just featured in the New York Times in their health and wellness section this past weekend highlighted a study that came out that said people who engaged in regular aerobic exercise, so they were walkers, they were swimmers, etc., their mortality risk was reduced about 27% compared to people who didn't exercise. But the people who did strength training twice a week, their risk of death, their mortality risk, was reduced 40% compared to people who didn't engage in exercise. So there's an enormous benefit at improving our lifespan, improving our health with strength training. And so why this works is because as we're engaging in resistance exercise, so pushing or pulling our muscles and joints against some resistance, we actually stimulate protein synthesis in our muscle. And so we have a muscle here on the left, or you can think about your bicep or any muscle in your body. The way that muscle sort of looks at a microscopic level is imagine a rope, and then imagine another rope right next to it, and another rope, and another rope. And we have these bundles of ropes, our muscle fibers, and they all come together to build a muscle. So as we engage in strength training, we're stimulating protein synthesis, and our ropes get a bigger diameter. They hypertrophy, and so we go from the muscle on the left to the muscle on the right, this bigger muscle that has more muscle mass and more muscle strength. I do need to highlight for a minute the role of nutrition, because we know that exercise is great. It will help improve your muscle strength and hypertrophy your muscle, but it'll be even better if you do it with a good diet. And so diets that are high in protein tend to accelerate and augment resistance exercise. As we're engaging in this, we also want to be cognizant of getting enough protein intake. Protein intake tends to be low among older adults because, one, it's expensive. An all-steak diet is going to be kind of pricey. There's changes in dentation where people say it's harder to kind of eat chewier foods, and I'm going to have to cook a steak or meat or chicken or all those things. And then there's also sort of the communication that we've been scared off of certain foods. Don't eat eggs, it's going to raise your cholesterol. Don't eat red meat, it's going to do all these damaging things for us. And so we really need to think about, there's lots of protein sources out there, both beans, like a vegetarian source, and meat products, but we need that protein intake to really advance our muscle strength. And so what the research would say as far as keys to success of your strength training program are that we need three things. One, the right intensity. We need something called periodization, and we need consistency. It's just like a medication. If we take our medicine once and then never take the pill again, is that going to be effective? No. So we need to be consistent and follow through with our medication regimen. This position statement came out from the National Strength and Conditioning Association, and what they said was echoing the messaging around aerobic exercise, dose response. The more dose you take of exercise medicine, the better your health outcomes. And in particular, higher intensity strength training is far more beneficial and effective than low or moderate intensity. So one of the things I often see as a physical therapist and someone who does exercise is I watch a lot of people exercise all the time. And I go to the gym and I watch people and what they do, and saying that sounds a little creepy, but it's not. I'm not, I'm just always interested in what people do. So often, if we're at a fitness facility or an exercise class, they might have a bunch of weights laying out. And people are encouraged to grab a pair of dumbbells or grab a weight. And without fail, what I always see is that everyone chooses the lightest weight possible. And And maybe you can think about your own behavior, right? What weight do you choose? Is it the light one or is it the heavy one? And there is very, very, very clear research that it is frankly a waste of your time if you're doing strength training exercises with such a light weight. There's something called the Choosing Wisely campaign, which is a public health initiative to identify essentially like all the things in healthcare that are like kind of bad and that need to be changed. And they're like bad practices, bad habits that people have gotten into. And there is one around strength training. And the position statement of Choosing Wisely is doing underdosed exercise or resistance exercise, not lifting enough weight, is totally ineffective. So we just have to stop doing this. So what should we be doing? And I'll get to that in a second of how we actually should be lifting weights. But I want to highlight some of the research more specifically around muscle power. And so we've been talking a lot about muscle strength. We can also talk about power, which is how fast you can move your limbs, or how fast you can move some load. And this research that came out, it's very old in the 90s, but it was sort of like the seminal study that said, you know, looking at these people, about half of them were men, average age was nearly 88. And they looked at how their leg power, how fast they could move a load with their quadricep muscle. And what they found was that it was significantly associated with all of their performance measures, meaning how fast we could rise from a chair, how well people could climb up stairs, their walking speed. So the better your muscle power, the more effectively you can function, essentially is what they're showing. Now, what was really key is that this study found women have less power in their legs than men. That's not earth-shattering, right? In general, women have less strength, they have less power. But power explains 86% of our walking speed. So if we look at someone's walking speed, a woman's walking speed, 86% of the speed that the woman walks is driven by her muscle power. So if walking speed is our sixth vital sign, and our muscle power is getting less and less and less, our walking speed is going to go down, down, down. We're going to have lots of health problems. So in particular for women, muscle power is really important. And so I'd like to invite you to demonstrate power right now. And so you don't have to, you can watch, or you can experience this for yourself. So in your chair, we're going to just try two examples. This is sort of a muscle strength movement where we're going to stand up from the chair at a casual speed. Okay, we're using our muscles casual. And back down. Okay, now I want you to just do that a few times, just get the feel for that. Casual speed. Okay, very easy. Cool. Now we're going to do this for power. So for power, because it's speed dependent, what I want you to do is to go up as fast as you possibly can. And then come down slowly. Do you feel a difference? What's the difference you feel? Resistance. Is it easier, harder? It's harder, right? So let's do that a few times. Up as fast as you possibly can, and then down slowly. And fast. And so this is a way we can work on muscle power. The idea of lifting as fast as you can to build that power and strength in your legs. So an easy exercise you can take home and start doing on your own whenever. So essentially what we want to do with our resistance exercise is just like aerobic exercise. We need that intensity. We want 70 to 80% of what is called your 1 rep max, which is the maximum amount of weight that you can lift one time. So how we do this in the clinic is that I take someone and I say, okay, we're gonna figure out what's the one weight that you can lift one time. And I give this person 20 pounds and they say, oh, I can't even lift that at all. And then I say, okay, well, let's try 10 pounds. And they do it one time and they go, whew, I can't do that anymore. So I calculate 70 to 80% and I say, okay, so anytime you're gonna do a bicep curl exercise, you need to be doing 7 or 8 pounds. Yes, that reaction is exactly what happens. You said, oh, because most people would go to an exercise class and pick up a 1 pound weight or a 2 pound weight, and it's totally underdosed, it's totally ineffective, it's the waste of time exercise. So we want to be sort of at that 70 to 80% level. Now, not everyone has the ability to go to a gym and calculate this all out, because what you actually really need to do, and what we do sort of in research, is we say, okay, you're going to do a bicep exercise, let's figure out what your 1 rep max is for that. Now you're going to do a chest press, let's figure that out, and a shoulder press, and we have to calculate 1 rep max for all these different exercises. So that's just not practical, but what is practical is this. Lift a weight you can do 10 times. So this is Goldilocks. If you're going to exercise and you're picking a weight and you say, okay, I'm doing this thing, I did it 25 repetitions, it's too light. If you pick up a weight and you do your exercise and you say, oh, 5 times, that's all I can do, it's too heavy. We want the weight that is just right, which is the weight you lift 10 times, you get to 10 and you say, I can maybe do 1 more, but I'm pretty good. So this is a huge behavioral shift because most, I would say 95% of people do not exercise this way. We're going and picking a weight that feels comfortable, and we're like, I can do this, and it's not challenging our muscle, we're not getting the benefits we need. And so your guiding principle is lift a weight that you can do 10 times. It also means that you probably need to have different weights available. So what you do for your biceps and your muscles right here might be different than what you do for your shoulders, and it might be different for your legs. So it takes a little bit more timing and planning, but that's what we need to have that effective dose of exercise. We also know that varying our routines leads to better outcomes. People are creatures of habit, and we love going to our same routine, our same exercise order, and unfortunately, that really doesn't help us. And so the idea of periodization, or changing the intensity, changing the order of exercises that we're doing, changing the number of repetitions, it actually surprises our body. And with that surprise, it sends better signals to the cells in our muscles and the cells in our brains to say, whoa, something's happening, you need to respond. And we see this in particular in our bones. So our bone cells get sort of used to our routines and they get complacent. And so as we're going about our regular routine, they're lazy and they say, I don't have to build any more bone cells, same old thing. But if I start stomping my foot, the bone cells in my leg that are being loaded say, what is going on? This person is stomping their feet. We need to respond appropriately, and it sends a stimulus to build our bones. So as we're thinking about our bone density, which another thing that normally decreases as we get older and is worse in women than men, we want to think about this phenomena of the surprise. We need the shocks to our system so that we're not sort of getting complacent and our bodies are just getting used to the same old thing. So we need to mix up our routines, take a new class, try something else, change the order of exercises that you're doing, the number of repetitions, the weights, etc. Make it different every time. So Nike would say, okay, now take this information and just do it. But we know it's not that easy. We don't just do it. And so our intentions and desires don't always translate into our behavior. How many of you have said or have the thought someday where you wake up and you're like, oh, today I'm going to go do this, and it doesn't happen? Right? And it doesn't have to be about exercise. I can wake up and say, oh, today is the day I'm going to clean my refrigerator. And it's a horrible task, and so I put it off, and then it gets to dinner time, and I say, oh, it's too late now. So our brains are really, really, really good, especially at things we don't necessarily want to do, to find excuses or reasons why. And so our intentions don't always translate into action. So how do we actually combat what is called the behavior intention gap, this distance between our desired behavior and what we know we should be doing? So there's really four sort of steps. The first is to create what's called an action plan. And in an action plan, it sounds funny, so just hear me out on this, but you are literally going to write down on a piece of paper, I want to exercise 2 times per week. I'm going to do it at this fitness facility. I'm going to do it at 10 o'clock in the morning. I'm going to do it with this person. If I don't feel like doing it, I'm going to call this person who's going to give me some motivation. I'm going to wear this. I'm going to put my clothes out the night before. I'm going to, you put together all of the details. And the more concrete, the more detailed we are, the more likely we are to follow through. So it can be as simple as setting your clothes out the night before. Research shows if you do that, you're more likely to engage in exercise the next day. When we have those concrete plans, we're more likely to follow through. The second piece is find some accountability. So whether that is joining a class that's on your calendar, finding a peer to exercise with you, it's just too easy to say, I'm going to go on YouTube and find an exercise program because there's nothing to hold you accountable. We also need to make things convenient. One of the common things that I think is so wrong is a lot of people assume when you retire, oh, you've got lots of free time. And we know that's not true, right? I think the retirees I work with are way busier than the other non-retirees I have. So we've got to find convenient ways to engage in exercise. If you have to drive somewhere and change clothes and do all this stuff, you're not going to follow through. And then the fourth thing is, and this is sort of it seems like, oh, duh, of course, but make it fun. There is a whole body of research from a researcher up in Canada that looks at our emotions and feelings while we are exercising and our subsequent behavior. And so it seems common sense, but if you're having fun, you're more likely to do something. Can't believe there's research about that, but it is. And so the key sort of finding is also end on a good note. You want to really have good associations. And I do think this is important because how many of you grew up in a time where maybe the physical education teacher was mean and the punishment was go run laps? Right? And how many of you have heard no pain, no gain? So unfortunately, our culture has created associations in our mind that movement and exercise are not good. Because we see, even as little kids in grade school, that running laps is a punishment. And so what is the memory that we associate? It's that running is actually horrible. Because I got yelled at, and now I had to do this as something, as a punishment. We don't have positive associations and positive memories that movement is fun, movement is the reward. So it's little things like saying to yourself, I love, this television show, so while it's on, that's when I'm gonna exercise, and then the commercial breaks, I'm gonna rest. So we form the positive association that I love my show is associated with movement. So we have to make it fun. There's also research that says In general, being in a group is more effective, it's more fun, you've got support, so if you can find those types of group activities, that's kind of also going to provide some accountability for you. So with that, we can think about our directive here to really think, how can we incorporate movement into our daily lives, move more, sit less. So the key here is some research that really says movement in general is really, really powerful. And this directive that we need as people to be up and moving is very clear. So this first study from 2015 looked at older adults with frailty and found they do less than 5 minutes of physical activity a day. That's very little. They're on average taking 2,800 steps per day. Who's heard the recommendation we should take 10,000 steps per day? So they're not even close. Other research has looked at how the levels of physical activity are actually associated with less deficit accumulation, meaning we get fewer chronic conditions the more active we are. And so, in summary, we really want to be thinking about how we can sit less, move more, and truly, for the best exercise kind of dosage to take our medicine, we need to turn up that intensity and take our medicine consistently. And so we want to think about, as you leave today, how can you make exercise fun, convenient for yourself? How can you plan for it? And how can you find those supports to keep yourself motivated, engaged, and moving? So my email address is there. I'm happy to chat more. We have a number of online exercise classes through some of the grants that we are running at CJE. So you can look on the website. It's cje.net/exercise, or just email me and I'm happy to send you information. And then we'd love to hear questions or any comments in our remaining time together.
Question.
Yes.
Okay. I usually get up around 6, and around 1 o'clock, all of a sudden I have this urge to take a nap. And it's usually around 20 minutes. 20 minutes to say a half hour.
Okay.
I told my doctor about this, and they said, oh, that's normal. Is it or not?
Yeah, so the question around sort of like activity pacing and naps and all of that. This is not my area of expertise, but from what, the literature I've read, naps, particularly of that duration, 20 minutes, are okay, and they're not going to interfere with like your sleep cycle at night. There's also a lot of literature out there on kind of sleep deprivation and how that is so bad for our cognitive health. So more sleep, definitely better. Kind of our guiding principle, I think, in geriatrics is this issue affecting your quality of life? If it is, then let's address it. So if a nap or something like that is affecting your quality of life, your physical functioning, if it's not, then don't worry about it. We often in PT clinics talk about activity pacing. So if someone does 5 hours of activity and then says, oh, I gotta rest, our suggestion is, well, let's pace it. Let's do 2 hours and a 15-minute break, 2 more hours and a 15-minute break. So you can kind of experiment with some of those pacing strategies.
Okay, I do have one other question.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, we're talking about 30 minutes a day. All right, now there was a new study done that it doesn't have to be, the 30 minutes does not have to be all at once.
That's correct.
What is your view on this?
Yeah, so in the physical activity guidelines, this is another sort of like the misconception maybe that we've grown up with, that you needed to exercise for at least 10 minutes for it to count. Has anyone heard this?
Yeah.
Okay, that is gone by the wayside. Really now the research says every minute counts. So even if you have 5 minutes between this section and the next one and you want to go out and just go for a power walk, that 5 minutes goes to your 150 minutes a week, and every minute that you are active is better than being inactive.
So then how does this come up with when you're doing it with your heart rate in there? So it has, that 5 minutes has to count with the resistance and with your heart rate, correct?
Yes, for the best results, we want even those shorter durations to be at a higher intensity. So as an example, I'll tell patients to say, when you go to the grocery store, park a little further away, because you'll get 2 minutes of walking in, from the far end of the grocery store. But while you're pushing the cart, don't push it leisurely, really crank up the speed. And part of the issue is, this is a cognitive thing that we have to overcome. It's a whole other talk I could do and would be happy to do at some point. But in essence, our brains sort of say, without us even thinking, what speed we should walk. And they have a set point because it minimizes the amount of calories we need to extend. So it's a sort of self-preservation strategy. We need to overcome that, because when you leave here today, you're not going to think about what speed to walk down the hall, you just do it. We need to retrain our brain. Okay, go a little faster to get our heart rates up.
Thank you.
So I have a question about protein intake, because I noticed that with my mom and dad, their appetite isn't the same. So then what is the recommended amount of grams or ounces of protein we should be getting every day?
Yeah, so what's the recommended amount of protein? It's a little person specific, because people have like renal diseases. So my guiding principle is always check with your doctor, given whatever chronic conditions you have. If you can consult with a registered dietitian or a nutritionist, also good, because as we get older, we're more complex and there's lots more interactions. I think the general kind of idea is this principle of 30-30-30. 30 grams of intake at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Because if you think about the typical American diet, what do we wake up in the morning and have? Little Cheerios or something, no protein. What do we have for lunch? Maybe a salad, not much protein, and we tend to log it all at the end of the day. And there's more research that's saying a consistent intake over the course of the day is more beneficial. Yeah.
What about when you have cramps, like sometimes when I lay down?
Yes.
Laying cramps, so I get up and go through the pain and but sometimes it could go, not so much now, it could go from one leg to the other, so is that?
Yeah, so leg cramps. Okay, so this is another one where I think it is a conversation to bring to your physician, because it could be truly like a muscle cramp. It could be something coming from your back that's radiating down. So it really needs to sort of tease that out. I will say in general, most people, not just older people, tend to be dehydrated. We just, as a culture, don't drink enough water. And that lack of fluid intake can be a cause of true muscle cramps. So we should be striving for about half of our body weight as our ounces of fluid intake each day. Most people don't even get close to that, right? So, you can kind of experiment with things like, does movement and stretching make this better? Does water make this better? But definitely, I think some of those things bring up with your general practitioner, just because there can be some other causes for sure.
About osteopenia. What do you feel about statins? I know that's not your area.
Oh yeah, statins.
Yeah, but I'm really curious.
Oh yeah, not my area. Definitely talk to a doctor or pharmacist about that one. The area where it overlaps is because one of the side effects is muscle pain. So people can feel a lot of muscle soreness, a lot of joint pain as a side effect, but talk to a physician, pharmacist.
Almost everybody that I know takes that. Almost everybody. And I've heard different things about it. Sometimes it doesn't, the outer part of the bone is and the inner part is weak.
Yeah, so I think it definitely is like a check with your pharmacist, because it is such a personal thing. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Did you have?
How do you, exercise is all well and good for your body, but how do you stay motivated and not bored?
She was.
So if I had the answer for that, I'd be like a billionaire, right? Because think about like every fitness thing that's out there in the world, like no one has a good answer for this. How do you prevent being bored? One, mix it up. Try new things. Make it social. I also am a big advocate for can we maybe shift our framing to say, you know, I'm being active, I'm not exercising. I think there's a lot of research and some of the work we've done is like exercise sounds horrible. It sounds like this is gonna be work. But if I'm active or I'm doing something with friends, it's a little more enjoyable. So, you know, I think that it comes down to your interests, your personality style, but really trying the thing that resonates with you. And I'm certainly happy if you want to email me and we can talk on the phone about more personal things and I can give some recommendations.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
What about, how do you feel about these fitness trackers that are, you know, to help motivate you or to, you know?
Yeah, so when Fitbit first came out, like the Fitbit watch, pedometer thing, they were actually wildly inaccurate because like most technology, it's tested on 25-year-old guys in California. It's not tested on, you know, it's all the like engineers and software developers. So it was totally inaccurate for older people. They've gotten better in the technology. I think some of the Apple Watch things where it can send you a prompt to say, you've been sitting for a while, time to get up. Those are actually really effective, and there's some good literature that when you get those prompts, people respond to it. And so one of the things you can do is like a no-tech solution is if you have Gmail, you know, schedule an appointment in your calendar because it'll send you an email to say, hey, stand up and go for a walk or move around. All of those prompts. You can even do a low-tech solution and slap a Post-it note on a mirror you walk past in your house that says, you know, every time you do it, do 10 squats to get that activity in. But in general, those prompts or those kind of nudges to say, hey, here's your reminder are really powerful. And it comes down to, you know, personality types. Like some people love the numbers and they love saying, oh, I did 5,500 steps today, I gotta do more. So it comes down to like what motivates you. Other people are like, I have this and never look at it. So it really is what drives you and what kinds of things do you like.
Music helps.
Oh, totally.
Dancing is probably not only is it good physically, since it makes you happy.
It makes you happy, and it is excellent cognitively because you have to remember all the steps. And it's something called a dual task exercise. I'm not just standing and lifting weights, I'm moving and having to remember, okay, my leg goes here, my arm goes here. I'm doing two things at once, and those are very powerful for improving our balance in particular.
Thank you.
Great, thank you everyone.